Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. Last month, Procter Gamble's fabric care brand Ariel unveiled a new iteration of its popular Share the Load campaign. Titled Silent Separation, the sixth edition aims to encourage men, women, and children to speak up and address the silence on gender inequality at home. To know more, we are in conversation today with Sharat Verma, Chief Marketing Officer P&G India and Vice President Fabric Care for P&G Indian Subcontinent, and Josy Paul, the Chairman at BBDO India. What are the consumer insights that drove the campaign, and how does purpose-driven marketing help the Ariel brand? Let's find out as we get ready to melt with Sharat and Josy. Sharat, let's begin with you. What were some of the consumer insights or studies that you drew upon for the latest iteration of the Share the Load campaign?
Thanks for the question. Every year with Share the Load, we want to drive meaningful conversation that drives social and cultural change. Share the Load aims to get gender equality in the division of household chores. That's the change that consumers want to see. This year is no different. We look at multiple sources of data. But the biggest one that we tap into is really conversations that consumers are having. Share the Load is really a movement, not really a campaign. So we want to really amplify, curate, direct conversations that consumers are having to bring about social and cultural change. We've been, in this conversation now for 8 years. So really tapping into what consumers are saying, looking at what the current barriers are that are coming in the way for consumers to change, are what we pick up on. This year is no different. We obviously have multiple surveys, consumer groups, etc. This year, the data was quite startling. 80% of Indian women said that, unequal distribution of household chores is impacting their relationship. 65% said that it's creating an emotional distance between them and their partner. And when we looked at the survey results from the couples we interviewed, couples who were happy and had strong relationships, we found that they were saying that 95% of them actually said that sharing the load or doing the chores together actually brings them closer. So really, this year's movement is about looking at how inequality impacts one's relationship over the long term, urging men to look at the signs of that impact, and then obviously urging them to change, the way they invest in their relationship, not take their partners for granted, and share the load.
Thank you, Sharat. Josy, next question for you.
Yeah.
From an agency point of view, what was the starting point of this iteration of the campaign? Where did you start?
So, there is no starting point, Suresh, because
it is a continuum?
Yeah, it's a continuum. You said the word. It's a continuum of 8 years. So, the brief, in a sense, is already in you, and as a collective, it's in your blood. Actually, we don't need to be told anything. It's really a response. Sharat always says, what is that one more thing that we can do to get men to share the load? What is that one more observation or some behavioral action? So these are things that we keep an eye on. And we don't start something. We sort of respond to what has already happened. And then we see what is happening in society today. So we're really sort of putting an X-ray into the emotional state of society at that point in time. So it is about that moment in time. So in this process where there is no client and no agency, because we are really one unit that has traveled this far, we are constantly bringing our observations, our personal anecdotes, our collective confessions, not insights, things that we've been seeing around us, our friends, people, friends of friends. So and then of course there is all the articles and material that you can lay your hands on. And then you form an hypothesis, or you form many hypotheses, and you start checking each of these. And from this comes some rich stuff. And that, along with quantitative and qualitative data, allows us to arrive at one or two possibilities. So it's a very, very explorative process. It's a very overwhelmingly emotional process. And often that which you try to change actually ends up changing you. It's that kind of immersive experience.
Now, Josy, let's talk about the actual film itself. What was the biggest challenge in producing and shooting this film?
So there are two things to this, right? One is the authenticity of this relationship and of the message, and to manage that sensitively, to be true to that relationship, and how far can you say without you having turned yourself into a script. I mean, it's got to be human beings, right? Talking to human beings, and especially human beings like in this case, the daughter speaking to a father. Like in Indian society, you don't have too much of where a daughter has that permission to sort of speak up to a father. And I thought for us that was the core of change, that if younger generation can speak to the older generation and we give them that license, then things could change. So that was one aspect that we had to handle very sensitively. And the other thing is the authenticity of what is happening in homes today, or in the lives of these relationships. So while all our dialogues are actually statements, they're real statements, they're not manufactured. They're things that we've received from people, from counselors, from couples, and then with Hemant, who's the scriptwriter, and Shimit, who's the director. It was just this very sensitive handling of this, so that we are not, I hope we don't come through as forced.
Sharat, coming back to you, Josie just said in a campaign like this, which is a long continuum over many years, there's no agency and there's no client. But there is a separation between agency and client. So how do you read Josie's statement, and how does that impact your interaction with the agency team?
No, actually, I think Jyoti said it well, right? We've been on this journey together for now, more than 8 years, because we started thinking of it maybe 9 years back, right? And we're just one team, right? This is not how, we don't run share the load like we normally run, the creative process. There is no brief. The brief is a one line brief: give men one more reason to share the load, and then share the load equally, right? So that's the brief, right? The idea is something we discuss and we arrive at together, and it keeps changing with the context, right? Because the idea and the product here really, as Josie says, is gender equality in the division of household chores. The product is not really Ariel, right? And what we really need to do is to look at where we left the conversation and how do we take the conversation forward. And then we tap into personal insights. You talk about data that we've picked up from research. We look at what's happening, what are the response to the last film, what are consumers saying, what are the other barriers that we haven't spoken about, right? How do we open people's minds, how do we open people's hearts? Who's the right person? As Josie looked at the film, who would be the right person to communicate to the dad? Would he listen to his own mother? Would he listen to his daughter more openly? How do you make sure you get the message across without making men feel defensive? There are all nuances which we have to talk about and discuss, and a lot of time is really spent on this, and this aspect. And obviously it's a live conversation, and therefore it's important for us to, while we amplify and we bring to life a certain aspect which we feel can carry, take the conversation forward, things keep changing, keep evolving, even during the course of the movement, right? There are things that come up, there are groups, or there are opinions that come up, and then we look at, we draw on data that we have, draw on influencers, draw on specialists, draw on marriage counselors. So it's a very different setup, and therefore it's just one team, and we meet kind of once a week for many months before we can finally arrive at something we all feel good about. The measure is really conversation. The measure is what is the asset that we can put out which can drive conversation and drive change. How can we do it in a way in which it's sensitive enough, to be able to be absorbed, for people to introspect and then change.
Sharad, one of the insights or one of the conversations that this is going to drive is something called silent separation. That's what your film talks about between two partners. This reminds me of a phenomenon called quiet quitting we had heard of a couple of years ago in the peak of the lockdown. Are the two of them related in any way? The silent separation, quiet quitting. Is this the marriage equivalent of quiet quitting at your job?
I won't say they're completely the same thing. What we are basically talking about here is that inequality over time leads to a bit of distance in a relationship, right? And partners try and resolve that, right? And there is conversation that's had, to be able to try and resolve it. And I'm talking from what consumers have told us, right? That we try to resolve it. But there's a point, which comes when you kind of give up and you feel that things are not going to change. And that's when you start getting into a zone of silence, right? Where you stop trying and stop investing in a relationship. And that's what we're trying to talk about here, right? It's about see the signs early on so that you don't get to a stage where there is silence in the relationship, where one person has kind of given up on trying to change an aspect of the relationship. The couple is still together, they're very much together. It's not that they are separated or they have any intention to separate. It's just that the quality of their relationship has deteriorated, and no one's happy about it. And that's what really the term is trying to capture.
Let me ask you a follow up question. How do you measure the impact that a film and a movement like this has had in real life?
No, I think we started, back in 2015, and I said the product is really, in gender equality in households, right? When we started back then, the data was quite startling. 95% of households had only women doing the laundry. 79% of married men, you know, said that laundry is only a woman's job. We've kind of had this conversation now for 8 years. We've kept it alive, and with that conversation, we've seen the impact and we've seen the mindset change, right? We coined a term called share the load. Share the load is a term coined by us, by BBDO and Ariel, and we've seen that now it's a part of vocabulary. Everybody is using it to talk about the subject of inequality in the division of household chores. We've now seen the stat go down from 79 progressively to 50 to 30, and as of last year's 26%. Very, very heartening to see. But there's so much more that needs to be done, right? That number needs to come down to zero. Why should anybody think that laundry is only, is the job of the woman only, right? And then we have obviously more and more men now, and millions of them have pledged to share the load equally. More than 50% are now, participating in household chores. But then it's not still equal. So there's a lot of work left, but there's lots of progress that's been made, and it's going to take time. This will take maybe another 10 years for us to get to where we want it to be, because it's a result of many, many, many decades of conditioning. So it'll take a bit of time to unwind, but we're very happy with the progress.
Okay, Josie, next question for you. Help me understand something. On one hand, we've been told that attention spans are shrinking, ad films need to be shorter and shorter, contents need to be snackable, I don't know, inhalable, digestible, all sorts of words are used. And Josie, you've created a commercial that's almost 4 minutes long. How does this tie in with this popular theory that we live in an era of short attention spans?
Yeah, that's a great question, Suresh. The thing is, it's not about the length of the time. It's really what or how much time people want to spend on something, right? So when it's really about relatability. When something is very relatable to their lives, we've seen people spending time on that. For us, it's really, we're not measuring this film based on its length. We're measuring it by the level of interest and engagement. And whenever we've shown it as an early pilot, people, and we would say, that's a 4-minute film you just watched. They'd say, really? I thought it was a 2-minute film. And so in that sense, time is such a relative thing, especially when you're so actively engaged,
Josie, let me ask you a follow up question. When you're evaluating a campaign like this, there's obviously the creative evaluation of authenticity and how did the message get transmitted and how genuine is the film to its script and to the campaign idea. But do you also use business metrics? For instance, how much sales did it drive?
Yeah, so that's again a great question, because that's not the objective of the film in the first place, right? It's really about What is the how much have you increased brand relevance? How much have you increased brand love? What is the nature of conversation? So for us, conversation is the metrics, because conversation drives desirability for the brand. Conversation drives desirability and therefore engagement and interest in the brand, and that's what drives change. So I think the metrics change a little. So it's not necessarily a business metrics, it's an equity metrics, I would say.
Let me ask the same question to Sharad. Sharad, we have seen P&G actively use cost-based marketing for its brands. Now, if I were to put on my cynical marketer hat and say, okay, this does great for brand love and brand recall and brand salience, what does it do for top-line growth?
At P&G, we believe that our brand should be a force for good and a force for growth, right? And we don't see them as really separate. We feel that they both serve the same purpose, right? Consumers these days are bombarded with advertising, right? People see over 5,000 messages a day. So there's so much clutter, right? We know that consumers want to know what their brands believe in, what they stand for. So it's very important for us to be able to lend our voice to causes that we feel that the consumer values, right? We know that consumers switch brands based on shared values and beliefs. 65% have said that they'd likely switch a brand based on shared values and beliefs if they feel that they connect more with another brand, right? So really the metrics, kind of overlap, right? We know that when you connect with consumers on shared values and beliefs, you get love, you get loyalty, the brand metrics. When you get brand metrics, you get, higher sales, right? So therefore, I don't see them as very different. Ariel has the best detergents that money can buy. We are the number one laundry company in the world. The product is outstanding. But really, the conversation that we've had on Share the Load is, not only helped us deliver change that the consumer wants to see, but also driven loyalty and love, right? Ariel's moved now to being the number 2 equity leader in India from number 4 or 5 that it was, maybe when we started off. We are one of the fastest growing brands in the category. And I think it's all related, right? Being a force for good definitely translates to growth. And that's what we believe in, and that's what we are seeing with Ariel.
Sharad, would it be fair to say that the aerial consumer is an urban consumer largely?
Yes. You could say that, yes, it is an urban, but we have a massive, 10 rupee business as well, which is a hand wash business. So it's not largely an urban consumer. But yes, our machine portfolio is over-indexed in urban India.
Is it because they're urban consumers that they care about cost-based marketing and brands that resonate with them? Or would you expect that rural consumers also care about these things?
I think what we've seen is everybody cares for it, right? This is such a fundamental thing, right? Everybody wants to be valued. Everybody wants to be treated with respect. Everybody wants to be treated equally. And this is something that consumers have told us, whether it's urban consumers or rural consumers. We are nowhere near where we want to be. And therefore, I feel it resonates with everyone. Right, and therefore the purpose of this movement really is to bring about that change that consumers want to see across India.
Josie, from an agency perspective, how does the agency ensure that a campaign like this get maximum mileage, sparks off the maximum number of conversation, and the fact that this campaign sustains and has legs of its own to keep running?
Yeah, so that's again a great question, because for us, mileage is, conversation is currency, right? That's what gives us the mileage. But how do you get that? You get that by not just being a one-way street, right? It's almost invitational. So the moment you sort of do something like this, it all starts getting partners, it starts getting volunteers, it starts getting hand raisers, it starts getting ambassadors, it starts getting partners and activists and all kinds of people you never expected who come into the fold. And they become the people who amplify your message and give you greater mileage. Because, like I said, it can't be just a one-way push. It's really what the volunteers and all the people who join the movement do for it, rather than just the brand.
What about multiple languages, Josy? How do you create a campaign in a country that speaks 25 languages and you want to have conversations in all those 25?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Right now, we're exploring turning this into multiple languages. We've done that with Dad Share the Load years ago, 6 years ago. We used local artists to get the right nuances. We used theatre people to get it right. So yes, we're working towards seeing that this reaches out to more people, that will allow more conversation in the local and hyperlocal languages.
All right, let me pose the final question to Sharat. Sharat, have you started work on the 7th edition and can we get a sneak peek?
That's a good question. We're always working on this, right? This is not something which is episodic, right? So we're always looking at how do we take the conversation forward, what can we use, which is within our means and control, right? When we look at, brand advertising, if you look at functional advertising, we have more men doing the laundry for Procter and Gamble ads than women doing the laundry, if you've noticed, be it Tide or Ariel. They're always men doing the laundry. We've got it on packaging. We've got a festival films. We had a Celebrate Equal film which had the same messaging, right? So it's a way of life for us. So we are always thinking, right? I think the next, edition will really come back to, what we're going to start formally working on that once we understand what the response for this one has been. Where is the conversation gone? It's a conversation. It's a two-way dialogue. Now we've put out something. People are going to react. People are going to, it's going to drive some change, some conversation, and then we'll see how to pick that up and then take it forward. And so that we can continue to move towards our goal of, gender equality in the division of household chores. So,
Okay, Josy and Sharat, thank you very much for talking to us at Melt.
thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Bye.
And with that, it's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm at Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.